In this episode, we talked to registered nurse Sandra Lander about her recovery from PTSD and substance use disorder.
My fight or flight kicked in. Instead of being the nurse that assists them, I started screaming and I ran out of the room.
Facing her own stigmatic thinking, Sandra refused to ask for help.
I was embarrassed that something was wrong with me, so I didn't reach out for help. I would tell my charge nurse, I'm sick, I need to go home. And my panic attacks became so frequent that I ended up quitting my job.
Her PTSD drove her to the very edge when she realized her addiction was going to end her.
Seeking support saved my life.
What's up? I'm your host, Dan. I'm joined in studio by my wife and co-host, Donna, and this is Hard Knocks Talks, your addictions podcast. Now, let's get into this inspiring talk about recovery with registered nurse Sandra Lander.
This is Hard Knocks Talks.
What's up, Sandra?
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
You mentioned earlier, or last time we talked, that PTSD is a big part of your story, and you incurred that PTSD in the emergency room. So why don't we start out there?
All right. So I became a nurse in the emergency department, and I was an ER nurse for about 5 years. Mm-hmm. So after about 5 years, I started having panic attacks in the middle of the night. I started having night terrors. I started having pretty much like nightmares of cases that I was in the emergency department.
So you started your nursing career in the emergency room? Like that was your first assignment?
Did you train specifically to go into that field? Like I imagine there's like a little bit different training for that. No, it's just, how did you end up there first?
It just seems like, did you make someone mad or?
Well, honestly, I had applied for a few different jobs. That's the first one that was like, hey, we want you. We love brand new baby nurses because we can train you. So I did a job shadow for like an hour. And then I was like, okay, I'll take it.
Oh my God.
For an hour.
Talk about sink or swim.
Did you like it at first? Were you happy where you were at?
I loved it. I absolutely loved the emergency department. I loved what I did. I loved what I got to do, who I got to see, the services I got to provide. I loved there was like an amazing adrenaline of like saving a life or running to a trauma or something like that, and being able to contribute to help save a life like that was like a feeling that I can't even describe.
Mm-hmm. That must have been intoxicating in and of itself.
After a while, it got kind of hard.
Yeah.
Like mentally and emotionally, like especially after the PTSD had started. Mm-hmm. But for a long time, I loved it and I didn't really have any issues.
You were already mentioning about the nightmares and things like that. Did you address it right away, or was this something that you kind of tried to keep hush hush for a while? How did that progress?
Yeah, so I didn't get help right away. I didn't I knew something was happening to me, but I really didn't know what it was. It wasn't like I had a realization like, oh, I have PTSD. It was just like I knew these were happening. I knew I was waking up with panic attacks. I knew, the things were happening to me, but I didn't get help or talk to anybody about it. And it started to get worse and worse. And it got to the point where on my way to work, I started having panic attacks. Because I was afraid to panic at work. And I would actually go into the bathroom and panic. And once I could kind of ground myself and bring myself together, I would tell my charge nurse, I'm sick, I need to go home. And my panic attacks became so frequent that I ended up quitting my job. And I was embarrassed that something was wrong with me. So I didn't reach out for help. I didn't even tell a supervisor. I really didn't tell anybody. And those actual symptoms led to a lot of different things in my life pretty much falling apart. And then that's where my life just went downhill.
At what point did substances really start to come into the picture?
So substances really came into the picture kind of a few years later after I had more mental health symptoms. I had a lot more trauma. My marriage fell apart. I ended up getting remarried. Like I had a whole bunch of my house burned down.
Whoa.
So it was all within like a very small window of time.
Uh-huh.
And I actually had a suicide attempt, and they put me on like a ton of medications. And after that, kind of is where the addiction started.
So where did you
Mm.
head after you quit nursing?
So I didn't work for a little while. And then I ended up doing case management for traumatic brain injury. So it was still a nursing job, but it was more like computer work and managing care. And actually, toward the end of that job, I started using. And so
Hmm.
I couldn't keep the job because I had started abusing my prescription drugs and
Hmm.
I just couldn't keep it. So I lost the job.
Hmm. What did that substance use look like then for you? Like, did you have like a social life? Like, were you going to the bar and stuff like that, and supplementing with the meds, or like tell us a little bit about what life looked like for you around that time.
Yeah, so when I first started abusing, I was abusing my Adderall and abusing my Xanax. So at
Hmm.
first, abusing the Adderall, it was just me really staying awake for days at home. And I was still working and everything. But then when I kind of switched over to the Xanax, for a while, I was functioning. I would wake up and do my day job, but then I would take the pills to put me to sleep. And so I would sleep like for hours and then set my alarm for dinner. I would wake up, cook dinner for my husband, take more pills, and go back to sleep.
Hmm.
And I did that for a while until I just couldn't keep up with it anymore. And I pretty much slept my life away for like the next 2 years. I lost the job and I pretty much just sedated myself and just slept.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I can relate. Donna and I both have a history with pills, and yeah, I do. I remember lots of times where we would do pills, and then we would wake up and do some more until we
Mm.
ran out, and then we would get sick, and oh man. So what?
Oh,
What you were married, you just mentioned you'd cook for your husband. How did the relationship unfold then? I mean, he must have voiced concerns, right?
yeah. So he did, but I hid it for kind of a long time because he would work. He worked a lot, but I would be awake when he came home. So he really wouldn't know I was sleeping for the last like 3, 4 hours.
Mm.
He would think I would be working or like whatever. So I hid a lot of it until like toward the last stage of it where I just slept forever.
Mm.
So I mean it did cause some issues for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Was there ever any questions? Now, when you mentioned you quit your nursing job and then you lost your admin job. Was there
Yeah.
ever any questions from your employers around the struggles that you were facing? Offers of help or supports or anything?
No. Well, actually, the second job that I did have, it was a smaller company, and so after I did quit or get fired, whichever one it was, they did reach out and they did offer support or offer, to help me and everything, and I wasn't ready for it. So from there, I pretty much slept my life away for the next couple of years. Literally one day, I woke up and I was laying in bed, and out of nowhere, for no reason, I just had this thought: what the heck are you doing with your life? And it was like an audible voice. It was almost like, wow, am I crazy? Like it was just this thought. Like, and then I like laid there and I really started to think, like, what the heck am I doing? And then I realized I didn't have connection with my kids anymore. And that realization, wow, I just got goosebumps. That
Mm.
realization for me uh was honestly enough to wake me up that day. And I called my husband and I was like, "Hey, I have a problem, but you probably don't know how much I'm taking and how bad it really is. Like, I need help.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm.
this is it. I need help. I can't live like this."
Yeah.
And how old were your kids at the time?
17, 18, 19.
Okay.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so, and my kids are older.
Yeah.
Yeah. But still, I'm a mama and that connection with your kids is like a life force. And
Mhm.
when I had that realization that day that I had lost my connection from my kids and that my life was just sleeping, and I was just sleeping my life away, that realization for me was enough to be like, oh my God, like I
Mm.
got to get up. I got to wake up. Like I got to live.
How did your husband react when full disclosure?
He was supportive. He
Was he
actually drove
surprised?
home.
Was he
He
surprised by?
wasn't really
No.
surprised.
Okay.
I think he was surprised that I asked for help,
Hmm. Yeah, that's hard.
but he wasn't surprised at like how much I was using and how much I thought he didn't know.
Okay.
Yeah. And then so he came home and we called my psychiatrist and, we told her, like, I've been abusing my medications and I want to stop. And so, of course, she's going to say, okay, here's some treatment centers. And I, for some reason, wouldn't go to a treatment center.
I've had nurses in the past do that same thing. My friend Lisa was in the studio about a month ago, and she mentioned that she was willing to go to a hospital, but not the hospital she worked at. No, and she mentioned there was some, and I'm sure that you can understand why that would be. Was there some of that in the reasons that you chose not to go to treatment?
So for me, I had a lot of guilt and shame. I felt like a disgrace to my profession
Hmm.
and I didn't want to go to a treatment center. I wouldn't even go to like NA. I wouldn't do any of that because I just felt like a disgrace to my profession and I was embarrassed and so much guilt and shame.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't do it.
So how did you do it then?
So I don't
I don't know.
No. I was gonna say I don't know what to say. I don't recommend this. So to anybody listening, please do not ever do this because you can die. I honestly had my husband and we did some research on tapering of Xanax and we tapered myself at home, weaned myself down and tapered, but it was actually horrific and brutal. I prolonged my own suffering. It was the withdrawal for me lasted about 6 weeks and it was the most horrific 6 weeks of my entire life. And if I could go back to that person who woke up that day, I would say, go to a treatment center.
Yeah. Trust me, you don't want to know what's about to happen.
And like, did your psychiatrist give you a heads up? Like,
well, I mean,
well, she did, but in my frame of mind, it didn't matter what anybody told me. I wasn't going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did she cut you off?
Oh yeah, she absolutely cut me off.
Yeah.
But she made sure that she had like a what did she give us? I think it was like a 30-day supply or something so we could wean myself down.
To me, I tried weaning down, and the medications and stuff that we were taking or that I was taking were different, but the withdrawal is equally as horrific. I'm curious, like that either you were like genuinely all the way done, or you have some kind of willpower. Like, what was it? Were you like fighting demons and like wanting to use that whole time, or were you just so done that you were just like, I don't care how sick I get, I'm not doing it anymore?
No, I fought demons every day. I screamed into my pillow because I wanted the pills so bad. Because to anyone listening who's not been on Xanax, when you get off of it, your anxiety, you have rebound anxiety, so it gets worse. Your panic attacks get worse. All of your symptoms, they get worse. So when you're tapering, you're dealing with all of these symptoms, and they're worse. They're worse than they were before, but you can't take what helps them because you're weaning off of it. So it was living hell. That's how I can describe it.
Wow.
So tell us, what was it like then when you started to come out of it? Now, was this something that you went back to work right away, or did you at any point like reach out for some sort of like peer support or anything? Like, tell us what your first, I don't know, let's talk about the first 6 months. What was that like for you?
Yeah, so actually excuse me. So after I got out of completely got the pills out of my system, it was actually right in the beginning of COVID where everything was starting to shut down. And so even if I wanted to, I really couldn't go into like an in-person meeting because everything was shutting down. So I first started doing it myself. I started buying a whole bunch of books, like books, tons and tons of books, books about boundaries, books about recovery. I just started doing it myself.
Hmm.
And then I was online and I had never seen coaching before. And I actually saw a free ad for a free challenge for coaching. It was for personal development coaching. And I took the free challenge and I joined. And actually, that's what helped started my like real recovery journey for, mental and emotional, spiritual wellness. And that's where I found my support
Oh.
family. And I learned, like how to build a routine. I learned how to connect to my higher power. I learned how to do like recovery.
Hmm. Was you mentioned higher power? Was spirituality or religion, was that a part of your life before you entered recovery?
Now it wasn't a part of my life. Like I kind of grew up in and out of church and I always had like a God in my heart and knew of a higher power, but I didn't really have like a personal relationship with a higher power until
Hmm.
I started recovery.
Hmm. Did you go back to nursing?
So about a year and a half ago, I got a job at a mental health clinic. It was a clinic that administered ketamine for mental health.
Hmm.
And I actually had a couple trauma responses while I worked there, so I couldn't continue working there.
When you walked into this ketamine clinic and started working, what did that trauma response feel like, and how did you handle it?
Sure. So, um, what actually was a trigger for me is someone said they were having a seizure and they started to seize, and my fight or flight kicked in. And instead of being the nurse that, assists them and helps them, I immediately had a trauma response and I started screaming and I ran out of the room for help, to get them
Mm.
help.
Mm.
Instead of me helping them, because I'm the nurse, I'm supposed to be there to help them. My trauma response was fight or flight and I fought and ran.
Yeah. Holy cow.
So
So,
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm just wondering, like before you began that position, like
Mhm.
I would assume that like or I would hope at least that the interview process would be pretty thorough and trying to like pinpoint, is there a potential for that sort of an occurrence, because like you have a professional duty as well, right? Like I just kind of wonder, like I would hope that in those sort of environments, like interview processes would be really thorough.
and I guess, like, just to sort of add to that a little bit, like, did you disclose, like, when you went and got this job, did you say, like, yeah, I struggled with PTSD and I struggled with substances, and now here we are? So was there that, or what did that look
Yes.
like?
Yes, yes. So actually, the physician that owned these clinics was a physician that used to work with me in
Oh.
that first emergency department. So
Okay.
she knew me personally. She knew, my mental health and PTSD history. She knew my substance use history. And it's a very small clinic and they're very close knit. And even though I was, by myself, in the patient room, there was obviously, doctors and other nurses like right outside of the room, that would help. But after that response, I didn't work there anymore.
Yeah.
I couldn't handle it.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And that was just the one time, and it was like, I'm not ready for this yet, or
Right, right. It was like,
yeah.
yeah, I can't do this. And so, I had talked to my boss and she gave me some time off and and that was not something that like really happens very frequently there. That was like kind of a freak fluke thing. Um, but it was enough for me to be like, yeah, I can't do this.
Uh-huh.
So I didn't go back.
Yeah. And how did that land with you? I mean, you go home and you tell your husband, or whatever, like, did that set you back on your journey? Like, cuz I mean, like, sometimes when things like this happen, you have a response and
Mhm.
you learn something about yourself, and this has been the case for me. Either it will free you for something, or it will weigh you down because you have things to learn and it's painful and tough. Now, what was that for you?
So for me, the biggest thing was I felt like I lost progress because I had done trauma treatment, I did EMDR, I did years of therapy. I've done so much like treatment and healing and all of that that I felt like, oh my gosh, I just lost all my progress. But I came to the realization that I didn't lose any progress. There's just things that still aren't fully healed. And, maybe that just wasn't the right job for me at the time. So I kept it positive, and now I'm actually a hospice nurse.
Oh, let's take a quick break here, and going to look at some sponsors, and then we're going to look at a comment, and then we're going to get back to it. Okay, this episode is premier sponsored by the Saskatchewan Union of Nurses. To learn more about them, check out their link in the show notes. Also, if you are struggling with the substance use of a loved one or have tragically lost a loved one to drug-related harms, reach out to Stronger Together Canada peer-led support groups by Mums Stop the Harm. If you are in search of private inpatient addictions treatment, check out Prairie Sky Recovery Centre, located in Leipzig, Saskatchewan. If you are looking for help with criminal record suspensions, the Elizabeth Fry Society of Saskatchewan covers all associated costs for women or gender-diverse individuals to apply for criminal record suspensions. Reach out to Chelsea at 306-668-0635. If you are a professional and wish to deepen your understanding of substance use disorder, check out the AIMS SK program through the College of Medicine at the University of Saskatchewan, designed to help you improve health outcomes for individuals with substance use disorder. To make contact or learn more about today's sponsors, check out our new merch, or if you want to show us some love and buy us a coffee, all those links are in the show notes below. So let's look at a comment from our friend Onyx.
So Onyx, thanks for your comment as always, says, this resonates with me. The function in the dysfunction till the moment of complete destruction. Bless you for licensing to your inner wisdom.
Licensing. Onyx.
She did that just to mess us up.
She probably did. She's just going to start throwing like random words that just don't even make sense in there. I always bug Onyx because there's typos and stuff, but yeah. Anyways.
She's the most wonderful human being.
Yeah. We just
she's probably not wearing her glasses, though.
Yeah, she's probably laughing right now, actually.
We love you, Onyx.
So you felt as though that took you back. A hit to the ego, would you say?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So now you're a hospice nurse, but like let's not jump ahead to that just yet.
Okay.
So you mentioned EMDR and some other therapies. Now tell us a little bit about that. I'm interested in EMDR myself, so that definitely piqued my interest. Tell us about how those things helped you move forward.
Okay, so I did cognitive behavioral therapy in the very beginning, but I don't remember. I don't remember it.
Maybe that works so good that it's just like gone.
Yeah. Maybe. And so another thing that maybe people aren't very aware of is that when you abuse Xanax and you pretty much sedate your brain for years, you have a lot of cognitive deficits when you get off of the drug. I felt like I had to relearn a lot of things. I stuttered for a really long time. My memory was like I had no memory. Short-term memory was just awful. Mm-hmm. So I don't remember the cognitive behavioral therapy, but I do remember the EMDR, and it was good, but I didn't like it.
Well, I mean, it triggers you, right? Like they trigger you on purpose. And was that what you didn't like about it?
Well, yeah, that's absolutely what it is. So I know there's different ways that it can be done, but the specific way that I did was the psychologist, or I think that's what they're called, who does it with you. They had me like tell a story, or they took me back to what happened, and then you would walk through it, and you would like re-feel everything. And so yeah, it pretty much just like re-triggered you, and you had to work through those feelings like in the moment, and you had to explain like the sights, sounds, smells, and then there was like there was movement and flickering lights. It was really cool process, but I mean, it's doing that deep inner dirty work.
Yeah. Did it bring you any relief?
It did.
Yeah.
It really did.
Yeah. Like ongoing, I guess permanent sort of progress.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. So I would recommend it, but it's not all rainbows while you're doing it.
Light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So you you had this incident, you were triggered, you left that position.
Mhm.
Where did you go from there? Like, did those triggers sort of encourage you to seek further therapies or do any sort of inside work, or did you just like, okay, well, maybe I'll just find a place that doesn't trigger me?
No, actually, so at that time I was still working like my program, my spiritual, I was doing meditation and journaling, and I was just doing a whole bunch of different holistic things.
Mm-hmm.
So actually after I left that job, I just took time to dig deeper and to do, self-healing things. I did also restart therapy, like talk therapy,
Mm-hmm.
but I mainly just I did, the things that helped me. I just took more time to do those things.
Okay. What did going back to work look like for you after that?
I pretty much spent a lot of time just building my nonprofit and working on my nonprofit. And
Okay.
then actually, out of nowhere, I got a phone call from a friend who had another friend that runs a hospice facility or a hospice company and thought I would be perfect for their case management nurse. And so I took that job and I've been there for about 7 months.
Hmm. Nonprofit. That's something that has emerged without really talking about.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, when did that happen, and what inspired that?
Earlier on in my story, when I had started that coaching group that became my support group, um, during that program, I kind of found my purpose and my passion, and I reconnected to my higher power. And I decided to found the nonprofit as part of like the purpose of my life and giving back to humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone in the group pretty much became the volunteers. They became members of the board and my co founders. And so I had all of that support to build the awareness campaign and the nonprofit.
And
It's
what
amazing.
is your mission with the nonprofit?
So our mission is to create awareness and provide support for mental health, and addiction recovery to prevent suicide and overdose death.
Okay. Do you have like a target demographic? Like, are you like we're seeking to help service providers, or what's it look like? Just whoever?
Nope. So our demographic is pretty much the world. We do
The
awareness
world.
outreach at the world. Um, yes, and we've spoken in schools. We've spoken to veterans. We've done so much. Actually, for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And what does your like when you go in to talk? Because I mean, your email address is Sandra Lee Speaks. I noticed that, and you have a website, and you do public speaking.
Yes.
How have you found like outside of your speaking? Because obviously, I'm sure that you pull from your personal experiences when you're talking, right? Like when you're doing speaking
Mhm.
engagements. And it
Yep.
sounds to me like you are also. Are you working one-on-one with people, or does your organization work one-on-one with people?
So our organization does not, but I actually have a company. I have a coaching company, and I do resilience coaching with my company, and I do work one on one.
Okay. And tell us about the value of your lived experiences when you're working with other people who have had these struggles. Do you pull from it a lot? Like, are
Oh,
you like you're always
absolutely.
like telling parts of your story where it's relevant? Like, what does it look like when
Yes.
you're working with someone?
Yes, absolutely. I try to share different parts of my story that relate to them or that they can relate to with as much vulnerability and transparency as possible.
Mm-hmm.
In that way, that actually builds deep connection.
Mm-hmm.
So I do that a lot.
Mm-hmm. I find it interesting that there's still a lot of organizations that frown upon that practice. They feel like it's getting too close to the client or whatever the case may be, and they'd rather you didn't, which I feel like is counterproductive. That's just my
Right,
opinion.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I wholeheartedly believe in transparency and vulnerability to connect with the individual. It makes such a lasting impact. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were going back, now you're a hospice nurse. Now, forgive my ignorance, and hopefully I'm not the only one that doesn't know what a hospice is. But what is a hospice?
Yeah,
I've heard
so
it so many
hospice.
times. I just don't know what it is. I never asked anyone.
Aw. So hospice is a company or like organization, or like hospice just altogether is pretty much the process of dying. So when you have like 6 months left, 6 months or less left to live, you can get hospice services. And what that is it is like end of life services where we don't treat the illnesses or treat anything. The goal is comfort, and the goal is to pretty much make you comfortable until your death.
Wow. And that, I mean, to me, that sounds like you may come face to face with things that may have triggered you or may trigger you often. Have you had any of those struggles in your new position?
I haven't actually. It's 7 months so far, and I haven't had anything. And
Hmm.
I actually have a very open relationship with my manager, who's very aware of the PTSD that I've struggled with. And there was one time that I thought I may have an issue, and I spoke to her about it, and it actually was never even an issue. But
Hmm.
she was aware in case I needed more support.
Hmm.
But yeah, I've been great.
That's amazing. So I'm wondering, you mentioned you have a resiliency coaching as well. Um,
Yes.
yeah. So how do you balance the two?
No, 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 no. So you mean like from the hospice job
Yeah.
to the
Like,
resiliency coaching?
yeah, that's
Yes,
like quite
absolutely.
a spread in focus.
Yes, you're so right. Really, it's for me, I need like my meditation practices, just to ground myself. And when I'm at one, I'm fully at one. And when I'm at the other, I'm fully at the other.
Hmm.
So it
Wow.
actually works great. But the overall is that I'd like to full time do the resiliency coaching and then the nonprofit.
Hmm.
So I really would like to be out of the hospice job within the next 6 months.
Hmm.
Okay. Cool. You were talking about, like, especially shortly after coming off of Xanax, the cognitive disabilities that you faced. So, is that something that repairs over time, or is there specific work that you had to do to regain that function?
For me, it just came back over time through repetitiveness and through just like relearning and
Mm.
learning new things.
Oh, okay.
So it seemed to just come back over time.
Hmm.
And roughly, like, how much time would you estimate? Maybe.
Hmm.
I'm asking simply, well, not simply, but partly because, like, with the extensive career I had in substances, I
I'm concerned that my brain is cooked, and I'm wondering if you can shed some light on this.
I totally am. Thanks for calling me out, Dan.
Yeah, I love you. It's
And
like,
I mean, it's such a thing that we had a neuroscientist on, and I can't remember if it was on air or off air, but I was kind of grilling her. I'm like, you know, so brain synapses and different things like that. Like, explain this stuff to me, because like, yeah, I feel like my brain does not like it used to, and I don't know if it's my age or if it's permanent damage or what's going on there.
Maybe 2 years, maybe 2 years. Like I was, pretty much back to like baseline, but my memory, I still have some issues with short term memory. And also sometimes my processing feels a little slow.
Mm.
Like sometimes someone will say something to me and it'll take me like maybe like a couple seconds more longer to like process what they're saying to me.
buffering.
So those
I feel
are a
that.
couple things that I've noticed.
Hmm.
Do you go through that too?
I do all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she's coming up on 6 years sober though, so I don't know
Yeah.
what, like, if it's 2 years, then I don't know, baby. Like,
I don't know.
don't worry, don't worry,
Yeah.
we'll get through this together.
Yeah.
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 Well, I'm 3.5 years, 3.5 years clean from the drugs, and so yeah, I'm still dealing with the memory and with the processing sometimes.
Mhm.
Hmm. If there's somebody out there tonight that is struggling like you were, or perhaps somebody that you think that you could be of service to, what are some things that you would tell them that perhaps could calm the storm, so to speak?
Honestly, if you're out there and you're listening, you can hear my voice, you're struggling with mental health, or you're struggling with addiction, I just want you to know that you're not alone. There's millions of people that are suffering. There are millions of people that fight every single day. And you're not alone. We're all connected. it is courageous to seek support when you need it. And seeking support saved my life. A lot of the time, I felt alone and I felt like there wasn't hope. And I was afraid to speak up for support. So I always like to say that it's courageous to speak up for support in case anyone's listening that feels that way.
Mm-hmm.
Where can people follow you?
So people can follow me. I believe I'm looking for the thing. Mine on Instagram is Sandra Lee or Sandra Lee Speaks on Instagram. And then you can also find the nonprofit awareness campaign at the Light It Up Project on Instagram.
Okay. And do you have a website?
Yes, www.loveandlighttotheworld.org.
Well, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great
It's
conversation.
been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And having said that, take care, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Sandra.
That's all I've got for you tonight. Thanks so much. Take care.
Say, this is Hard Knocks Talks.